What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the pod. If you are brand new, welcome for the first time. I gotta find a better way to say that. I'm always like, what's up? Welcome back. If you're brand new, welcome for the first time. There's gotta be a better way to say that. Anyway, welcome. Welcome to the pod. How are y'all doing? I hope you guys are good. Um, this is not the last episode, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer to the last episode. It's been a while since I've just like talked before an episode, but I'm gonna split this pod up into seasons. So season one is gonna end after about the 12th episode. I think we're on the 8th or the ninth right now. And so the first season is almost up. It's almost done. So when we come back for season two, um, I'm gonna try switch up a few things. Um, gonna try to do things a little bit different. We're gonna have guests. I'm gonna try to approach the podcast's episodes too in a little bit of a different way, and hopefully y'all rock with that. But I'm just gonna seek the Lord on like the direction that He wants for it and how He wants me to present the podcast, how He wants me to show up on here, and make episodes that actually do help you, but that I feel it's what He's leading me to do as well. So that's a quick little update for the pod. Season's almost done. It's been cool. It's been fun. Again, this is the first time I've podcasted in like 2 years, and I think it's been really dope to do it again. It's been fun, and I like this. I like talking to y'all. Y'all aren't in the room, but I low key feel like you are. So yeah. Thanks so much for being here. Today, I want to talk about um, not really suffering, but it fits in that conversation. It fits in that context. But I just want to talk about a story in John chapter 9 called Jesus Heals a Man Born Blind. And I read this today, this morning. And as I was reading, I just had like so many questions that popped up. I'm not going to read all of it. It's 41 verses, right? But I'm going to read the first part and then a little bit of like the second half, which is like from verse 8 stopping at like verse 12. But really that's where we're going to be at. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. But I read it and I thought it was interesting. And that it kind of in a few different ways that kind of shows us how we think about God, and then it also shows us God's goal in the things that we do encounter in life, which usually it's not the same. We don't think the same. Us and God, we don't think the same. But I thought it was really cool because I find myself thinking like this sometimes toward myself, and then also thinking that God is doing something because I am, being punished for something. I'm yapping a little too much and it'll make sense like when we actually start reading the thing. But yeah, I think it's a really dope conversation and hopefully it helps you the way that it helped me. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna read it, and then we will talk about it. So again, it's John 9, starting from verse 1. It says, "As he passed by," and this is right after Jesus was talking to the Jews. He basically just said, "Yo, I'm God," and he said that when Abraham, what do you say? Before Abraham was, I am, which I am is the name that God told Moses when Moses was like, yo, if they ask what's your name, what should I say? And God's like, I am who I am. And so to the Jews, Jesus saying before Abraham was, I am, he's equating himself to God, which he is God. He actually is God. So he's basically just exposed his deity. And after he said that, they tried to stone him. And so, verse 9, chapter 9 starts off saying, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he may be born blind? And Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is still day, for night is coming, and when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam. I don't really know how to say it. Um, Wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Um, so we're going to stop there. We just stopped at verse 7. And there are three things that I saw as I was reading it this morning that stood out to me just in those 7 verses. Three different things in the way that we think and in the way that God sees things, which is very interesting to me. The first one is that the disciples ask him, they're like, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Um, and as I was reading that question, I was like, we naturally have assumptions that whenever something is terrible or goes wrong, it's because we sinned. And in this situation, his disciples are asking, they're like, "Yo, was it his mom or his dad that sinned, that kind of like bled into his bloodline or whatever? And that's the reason why he's suffering in this way and being punished in this way. It's because of his sin or because of the sin of his parents," which is an aspect. It's like we can sin and that can affect us, that can affect the people around us, that can affect our families. um, the Bible does talk about things being generational, and the way that we handle sin has a massive effect on not only our lives but also on other people's lives. But as I was reading it, I was like, that is just the natural understanding that we have. And for anybody who might have thought about it in this way, like if things are going terribly, you naturally assume that you have done something terrible, or that you've done something wrong, or that you are the problem, and that God is punishing you for something that you did, even though that may not be the case and you actually didn't do nothing at all. um that is what caught my eye, because I think oftentimes we forget that we were born in sin and shaped in iniquity. And so, any time that we see brokenness in the world, we see disease, we see um, just things that are unfortunate and tragic, really, it's not necessarily because God is punishing all those individual situations, but it's because the world is broken. That wasn't God's original design. God's original design was distorted in the garden. And that is the reason why humanity experiences brokenness from sin. So, in a way, they are kind of right to be like, "Yo, was it sin that caused this?" They're more specifically asking, was it this man who sinned, or was it his parents who sinned that caused this specific um, ailment, right? But it was actually the sin of Adam and Eve that then caused brokenness to come into the world. And so I think a lot of the times, like, we can think that whenever something goes wrong, or someone is suffering in some type of way, someone has a disease, something tragic happened, it's that God punished them because they did something wrong, which is not necessarily the truth. Unfortunate things happen, tough circumstances happen, and it's not necessarily because you're living in sin. You could be living a righteous life. I just think of Job. Like, so many unfortunate things happened to Job and he was living a righteous life. It's not because that he was living a sinful and wicked life that all of that happened. It's like that happened, and this is for different set of circumstances, because there was a whole conversation between God and the devil, which is a whole separate chat. But um in other situations, it's like it's because of the brokenness of the world that we do experience the brokenness of the world, and it affects us, and we it's just the world that we live in. So For anyone who kind of struggles with that, like whenever something goes wrong and you think it's your fault, you sinned, you're doing something wrong, you start examining your life and cross-examining your life and trying to um, be perfect in all kinds of areas. I hope that kind of like removes some form of pressure to know that we are born into a broken world and sometimes bad things happen just because bad things happen. It's not necessarily because of you, it's because the world is broken and people are broken and people are sinful. And so that's the cause for a lot of things. But the second thing that I found interesting is that Jesus responds to this question and says, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." And when I read this, the first thing that came to mind was, isn't that unfair? Isn't it unfair that this man didn't sin, his parents didn't sin, but he's been blind all this time? I'm not sure how old he was. I can only assume he's like 30. And that's based off of nothing, really. I'm just assuming he's like 30. Um, and it wasn't because of him, it wasn't because of his parents, but Jesus says it's so the works of God might be displayed in him. I'm like, isn't that unfair? He didn't do anything to deserve that. He didn't do anything to be blind for all these years. He's been a beggar. People have looked at him as a social outcast. He's missed out on opportunities. He's missed out on life. He literally has missed out on even seeing the things around him, right? He never saw the faces of his parents or his other family members or his friends. It's like he's never seen the world. He's never seen the sun. He's never seen the trees. I'm like, isn't that cruel? Um, and again, I had to remind myself that again we were born into a broken world. And so when things like that happen that are difficult to understand, it's like my first thought, and I'm sure many of y'all's first thoughts are, isn't that unfair? Why would God do this? Why would God allow it? And it's hard to accept um, the fact that God would allow such a thing. But at the same time, this is also creating space for his testimony. This is also creating space for his testimony. The thing about God is that there's unfortunate circumstances that happen because of the brokenness of the world. And again, like literally, it is unfortunate. It's painful. It's sad. We may not understand it sometimes, but it's also purposeful. And there's not a single thing that would happen that is painful, that is hard, and that is just really and truly tragic and unfortunate that God cannot use and cannot redeem. He's not doing it to prove a point. I don't think he made this man blind, that this man was born blind so that Jesus could show up at this very moment to prove a point, to be like, yo, I'm powerful. I'm all these things, right? But I think this happened in exactly the way that it says it, that the works of God might be displayed in him to show that Jesus is a redeemer, to show that Jesus can actually take um, something that is as impossible as making a blind man see. It's like Jesus can do that. And I'm sure throughout all these years, this man has been blind, he's been an outcast, all these things. I'm sure he's believed certain things about himself to be like, he'll never be loved by anyone, maybe. To be like, he'll never be accepted by anyone. He's worthless, that God hates him, and that's why God created him in this way. And God did not intend to create him like that. God's original design was good and perfect, remember? But sin entered the world and brokenness entered the world, and that is what is affecting this man. That's why he was born blind. Not because God initially intended that, but because sin and brokenness caused that. And I'm sure he's had all these beliefs in his mind about himself, about God, about the world, about everything that's been formed around this tragedy in his life. And Jesus shows up not to prove a point, but Jesus shows up to tell him that he's loved when other people say he's unlovable, to tell him that he's accepted when other people say that he's an outcast, to tell him that he is redeemable and he can actually be healed when he actually thought that he could not. That's what Jesus does. That's what Jesus came to do in all of our lives, in all of the brokenness that we experience, not to prove a point, which is something I struggled to see at times. Especially when I first became a Christian, that was something I would ask all the time, constantly. I'll be like, yo, if God, you knew this would happen, you knew it would go down like this, you knew how this would affect me, how this would affect them, like, why did you let it happen? And I think this verse, at least for me, kind of answers that the works of God might be displayed in him, and that we would know God, and that we would see him for who he actually is. And that in turn would change the way that we see ourselves, because we would receive identity from him that shows us that far beyond circumstances, God's character and who God is actually good, even though the things that we go through may be bad. And so that's something that I noticed. That's that's another key thing that I think greatly affects how we deal with suffering, greatly affects how we deal with life in general when things go wrong, is wondering why it happens. And I think the Lord wants us to go from asking God, why is this happening? Why did you allow this? Why? Like, why? And I think there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking him why. I don't think there's anything wrong with expressing your frustration or your anger. Asking how long, like David in the Psalms asked, how long, O Lord? Like, how long will this go on? How long will I continue feeling this pain? Will I continue feeling this affliction, being in this environment that I don't want to be in? How long will I be in this waiting season? It's like, I think that's perfectly fine as long as those questions lead us to God and not away from God. And we find comfort in God and not in other things that we are now making out to be our God, in idols. But I think the question, at least for me, and hopefully for you, moves from God, why would you do this, to God, what are you trying to show through this? Like, what am I supposed to be learning through this? What significance is there in this situation? Because if you say that you are a good God, and you say that every situation can be used for good, that all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. If you say that and that's true, then that means there's something that you're doing through this situation. You may not have caused it. You may not have wanted me to experience this pain, but hey, man, we here. So what are we doing? What are you going to show me through this? What's going to happen? Where are we going from here? And I think that's what God would want us to build, because it keeps us planted. I think that our questions when we go through suffering and we're like, yo, why would this happen? God, why would you allow that? I'm mad at you, God. I'm frustrated. Those questions, they have the potential to lead us further from God than they do to lead us closer to God. I think more often than not, it actually leads us further to God, because we think that he's the one who's out to get us, where really sin is the reason why, but we think God is the one who's out to get us. And then we go off and we experience sin, we experience more misfortune, we experience more pain, all these things. And we struggle to get closer and closer and closer to God. And I think part of that is having to admit that we actually need him. A potential hard part in that is just also having to admit that we do need help in these things within us that we just can't solve by ourselves. And it's only the work of God that can actually heal those things and help those things, which kind of means coming to terms with the fact that this thing happened. This was a bad thing. And now you want me to go to the God that I think caused this, and the God that I'm mad at, and the God that I'm angry at. But when we kind of reshape the way we see this whole thing, it's like now we come to an understanding that, okay, God's original intention was good and perfect. He didn't intend for this to happen. Sin and brokenness entered the world, and that sin and brokenness affected me. And now God is trying to meet me in my pain and my brokenness, to redeem me and show me his love. Not because he's the one who did it and he wants glory out of the situation to prove that he's super powerful and he's a narcissist, but because he loves you. Because he loves you, and he now wants to invite you into a healing that we can never experience apart from God. And so I feel like that's the healing that also comes into that. But big for me, big part in this whole thing is that God can use anything for good, to help us, to heal us, to redeem us, to show us himself, to show us more about ourselves, for us to experience his love and his kindness. Yeah, and if y'all are watching on YouTube, it's a lot of cuts going on. That's because my phone keeps not dying. Look, I ain't got no storage. We're not really gonna talk about that. But like, I just deleted YouTube Studio off my phone, and that cleared like 30 gigabytes. I'm like, bro, why? Why do you take up that much space? I have 17,000. We're also not going to talk about that. I have 17,000 emails that I have not opened. And I deleted Gmail. And that like barely dented it. But once I deleted a YouTube Studio, that just like cleared most of it. I'm like, I don't understand. Um, but hopefully that was the last cut. My phone's also on 10%. So really, we just out here. We're trying. Storage gone out like 3 times, so the video stopped. My phone's on 10%. Um, let's get to the last point. Let me not yap. It's like we don't got much time. Um, third thing talks about the part where Jesus now, I'll just read it. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. So he sent him and washed, and then he came back seeing. Something that caught my eye is the word anointed. Jesus says anointed him, which anoint is like he's anointed you for a purpose. He's anointed you to do something. This is not just a coincidence. I think he used the word anoint specifically for a reason, because this man had a purpose that he could not see, both literally and figuratively, until Jesus anointed him. And he uses a very odd method to do it, but it's like even in the messy situations and the dirty situations, I guess. It's like Jesus can use those too. The things that don't make sense, the things that are confusing. It's like Jesus anoints this man for a purpose and heals him. And we actually see this purpose later on when he's testifying that Jesus healed him. And he's talking to the Pharisees, who claim to see but are actually blind. This man who was actually blind and now sees Jesus clearly is now testifying his healing to the Pharisees who claim to see God but are actually the ones who are spiritually blind. That Jesus has been, that's what he's been trying to get at this entire time. And so now this man has a purpose. This man's purpose has been revealed. Once his physical eyes were opened, his spiritual purpose was also kind of revealed. And it's like he can now go out and testify about the works that God has done in his life. And is basically being commissioned and anointed to go and do that, using the very misfortune that was over his life to potentially transform other lives by testifying what Jesus did through that situation. And I think when we look about it, when we look at it like that, and we see that it is actually redemptive in nature, why we go through such things, and Jesus steps in to redeem, it's like to give us purpose, to give us new meaning, to give us value, to give us identity, to give us a new way of seeing things, a new way of seeing ourselves, and a new way of seeing God, a new way of seeing people. And I think that that is incredibly beautiful. I'm going to read something that I wrote like right after. And I'm also trying to be quick because I know I only got like 8% probably. But yeah, we'll probably talk about suffering in another pod. So, but anyway, I said, as I was writing to myself, journaling this morning, I was born into sin and shaped in iniquity. This was not God's original design, and He did not want this for me. But the world is broken, and I am affected by that brokenness. Some situations I can't explain. Why I was born the way I am, with the struggles I have, the pain that I've experienced in life, and current circumstances beyond my control. I used to believe all these things were God punishing me. And natural consequence to sin and poor choices is punishment enough. But God wants to heal and redeem me. He didn't cause all these things to happen. The brokenness of the world did. And as much as it may be hard to accept that God still allows it, the truth remains that He does show up in brokenness to redeem it. And so the question is, how is Jesus healing me? The answer is that He's healing me within the pain of my circumstances every time I choose to invite Him into it. The circumstance and brokenness of the world may not change, but my heart can. He will bring healing through the circumstance. And so before my phone dies, let's pray. Jesus, I thank You for everybody who's watching the pod, who was able to listen in and to just hopefully have been able to receive a new way of seeing You, a new way of experiencing You through what we've talked about. And I pray, God, that You would slowly but surely reveal the purpose in the pain and suffering that all of us go through. I pray that You would reshape the way that we see You, and I pray that You would reshape the way that we even see ourselves, and that You would give us identity, You would give us purpose, You would give us value, You would be the one to show up and redeem the way that we see life, the way that we do life, and that we would be able to look at the thing that was once something that inhibited us, once something that held us captive, that hurt us, that confused us. That would be the very thing that we can go and testify about, to help other people, to bring You glory, and also just to live out a purpose that we thought we could never live. You came to give us life and to give us life abundantly. And when You show up in our situations to redeem us, that's what You're doing. You're giving us life. You're renewing us. You're giving us something new in us. And so, God, I pray that for every single person watching this episode, in Jesus' name, amen. So, I'll catch y'all in the next episode. I hope that was helpful to y'all. Yeah. I'm gonna catch y'all. Peace. It's been a while, yeah, tears fell, but I'm still here, it's all well. Struggle, still going, still real, but I got a new hope.